And welcome back, everybody. We are here for the 2023 Pokemon Utrecht special event, and we are reaching the stage of the weekend where, of course, we've got the highly anticipated top 8 cut to look forward to. I am Costa Dimos, and I am joined once again by the ever so lovely Mr. Simon van der Bocht, aka Schmo.
Thank you for that beautiful intro. Of course, we're back at it again. This is the top 8 that we have been waiting for. This is what the entire event has been cultivating to, this top 8, where it's very important to try and win all of your games this time around, because of course if you manage to lose, that will mean you will not go to top 4, meaning you will not go to finals and then become the champion, of course.
Well, exactly, because we are now in the knockout stage phase of the tournament, where your tournament line is on, or life should I say, is on the line, naturally speaking. So every single battle from here on out is basically going to be the culmination of your efforts for the weekend. Of course, there are CP rewards to be taken into consideration based on whether you get, let's say, the finalist spot, top 4 or top 8. Unfortunately, no prize money, as we did mention. This is a special event, so there were no prize fees going into the event as well that you needed to book. So that's sort of the parallel between there. But what we're going to do is, of course, give a quick look onto the standings, the top 32, generally speaking. We'll start from the top 16 to have a bit of a look to see who has been able to reach top 8. We've got in first seed place Juan Manuel Odriozola with a 13-1 record, standing on top most deservedly, only dropping a single set.
I can't believe that. That is amazing to see. It's just amazing, especially when you look at all these players, look at their scores as well, and seeing like how well they have been playing against each other. And these are the top players as well, just dropping one set out of all of that. That is honestly very impressive there.
Yeah, exactly that, as we do have Eric Rios coming in at 12-2, accompanied by Marco Silva and Antonio Jesus Sanchez. So very good representation of Spain so far into the top 4. We've got 3 of the trainers as well as 1 Italian there. Following up with 11-3 records, we do have Alex Gomez, which is in 5th spot, Giulio Tarlao in 6th, Oliver Eskolin in 7th from Finland, and rounding it up with Aurélien Soula, who is from France, in 8th spot. So that is our top 8, of course. Unfortunately, everyone passed that, so our current reigning world champion, Eduardo Cunha, unfortunately did reach that 9th spot, which is just down to the smallest of statistical differences of resistances, for example. And it's quite tough, because essentially that is the bubble position that we always refer to, which is the one person that is immediately after, let's say, the 8th person in this case, that just missed out from Top Gun.
Exactly. There are a lot of factors there. There is like the opponents you played against, how well they scored as well is another factor as well, and who they played. And it is one of those things that is hard to control. Of course, the best thing to go around is win all of your own games. And yeah, that is the main idea. And then, of course, hoping that your opponents are playing pretty well as well, so to keep up that score as well. And it happens, unfortunately, but the good news is still there is still these championship points that are still gonna be awarded to all of these players, as well as we have the following people from 17 to 32 as well. As we see that there's still very, very good scores still all around.
Yeah, a lot of really good players that unfortunately have quite literally missed the cut here. As Leo Bonanomi, we've seen him from Italy do incredibly well. He was able to face off against Arash Omati for the win and in day 1 Swiss, which was definitely an explosive set, if I do say so myself, with the Dragonite, Choice Band, Flying Terra type, just dealing too much damage, accompanied by a critical hit.
Exactly, it was an enormous, amazing play to see there. It was just that reminder of like all of those amazing battles that have already been passed, and luckily we can rewatch. Luckily for that, and
not right now, but if you do want to check it out, you most definitely can.
Exactly, and I'm happy to see what all of these important battles have cultivated to this top 8, because of course this top 8 are the players that have tried to find the way to break this tournament in pieces, so that they, with their own team, can try to win, well, the whole championship, the title, and a few booster boxes as well to take.
Yeah, most definitely. I think being able to have the top 8 best trainers here at the tournament that are, of course, going to be battling it out now for the knockout stage. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure going into this day, with a lot of games under your belt already. So it's not like you're starting up fresh just to go into your top 8 cut match. You've already had another 5 grueling rounds you've had to go through, with a lot of mental fatigue as well as physical fatigue. You know, as a highest priority, always make sure you keep on staying hydrated, you're freshening yourself up, you're waking yourself up, you're like, go outside, get some fresh air, just in order to get yourself into the right mindset coming back into this. So a lot of these trainers that are already well known have that sort of additional level where they can handle themselves quite nicely. They've got a lot of experience. They've been through this sort of revolutions multiple times, and we have 2 of those very trainers who are going to be featured for our first top 8 cut match. We have Oliver Eskolin versus Eric Rios, of which is a rematch between these 2 titans of VGC with last year's European International Championship, where we did see Eric Rios was able to win that title and is the current reigning European International Champion, versus Oliver Eskolin, of which was in a Dynamax format. Of course, you can see a couple of those achievements at the current point here that, they already speak for themselves, if I do say so myself.
Exactly, as we do see that they managed to have a lot of these titles here, just being able to showcase how well versed these players are in the game that is called Pokemon, with these different metas and different games on all ends. And we have already seen this team today, but now we have the King Gambit, the Brood Bonnet, the Arcanine, the Iron Bundle, the Fluttermane, and the Dragonite here being back at it again with that Choice Band.
With the Choice Band, we know that it puts in a lot of offensive pressure the moment that it is on the field, especially is quite interesting. We've seen it paired up quite nicely with a Fire, Water, Grass Crawl. Once again, it sort of offsets any bad matchups going into the slot, let's say for the Fire type. And Dragonite itself seems to do quite nicely when paired up with a Fluttermane. In this case, of course, Choice Specs, just for the additional damage output.
Exactly, and on the other hand, of course, we have Eric, his team, which is Iron Hands, Amoonguss, Arcanine, Iron Bundle, Golago, and Roaring Moon. Very similar core there. Of course, Amoonguss and Brood Bonnet switching out the roles they give out to each other. Still having that Grass, Fire, Water core, but then we have the Golago, Roaring Moon, and Iron Hands as an addition, because Golago still showcasing it is a very strong Pokemon to have with those potential nasty plots and those defensive Terra types that can always come in handy as well.
It proves to always be a Pokemon that deserves and demands respect, especially if you got a situation where you're able to have redirection by its side, as of course we do note with that Amoonguss. If there's no safety guard rules or grass type powered Pokemon on the opposing side of the field, you're able to allow the Golden Go a bit of breathing room, getting nasty plots set up, putting immediate pressure, and it's a really nice item to have on the Golden Go, that being of course the leftovers. You can play a bit around not only with redirection but also with your own Protect in order to stall and get your Golden Go out of any sort of threat damage range as well.
And as we do see the leads here, we have the Amoonguss next to the Iron Hand, while here as well as another blue Amoonguss, but the Brood Bonnet and the Arcanine immediately going out with the Intimidate onto this Iron Hand, lowering its attack set already by 1.
By one indeed. So it's quite important in this scenario because Iron Hands is not going to be able to dispatch as much offensive pressure as it would like, but it does have other roles. It does fill, it has fake out pressure available, it does have the pivot action going for itself with the Volt Switch. So for example, because it's so tanky, it does have the Assault Vest, it can sort of slow pivot itself out in order to bring a Pokemon from the back in safely. And talking about switching out, we are going to be seeing the Brute Bonnet switching out indeed. King Gambit taking his place.
King Gambit taking his place could be supposed to be very interesting because, of course, the Brute Bonnet not necessarily wanting to be met with the... Oh, another Arcanine Intimidate. Might have predicted this, going with the Defiant boost on the King Gambits, and while we still have to see what is going on, the Iron Hands not going for Fake Out, but Flare Blitz from the Arcanine into the Iron Hands, doing quite a bit of damage.
Doing quite a bit of damage indeed. Volt Switch will be targeting down the Arcanine slot, dealing a tiny bit of chip damage. However, like we just mentioned, you do have the accessibility of having the slow pivot action going for yourself. Seems like this Amoonguss, even though at the beginning of this turn was on the left-hand side of Eric's field, was able to go through the revolving door of, let's say, Pokemon in this case, where it switched itself back out onto the field. It does have the Rage Powder available, and Arcanine is right next to it.
Exactly. We have been showcased a little bit how good this defensive score can work because the Arcanine on switching with the Intimidate, so trying to make sure, and with that fire typing, then you have the Amoonguss itself, of course, making sure to have that regenerator and that bulk that it has to possibly redirect any moves. Now, with the Arcanine from Oliver's side, intimidated, not guaranteeing maybe a Flare Blitz KO there from the Arcanine onto the Amoonguss, as we do see the Arcanine actually switch out to the Iron Hands yet again, while the Amoonguss just going for the Protect, just making sure that it will stay safe this turn.
As Flare Blitz is going to target down the slot there. What was originally an Arcanine, so I think Oliver is just trying to focus down and already is aware of the playstyle Eric tends to go for in trying to play very passive defensive switches. And the main important thing for Eric right now is he wants to try to get that pivot action going in order to have an advantage when it comes to the board state. Oliver reading through this saying, okay, you know what, I understand how and know how Eric plays. I want to try to limit his freedom when it comes to him making these sort of plays.
Exactly, and now because the Iron Hands being very low, can still go for a potential fake out. This King Gambit, of course, being the Assault Vest set, meaning it cannot have that Protect. Meaning you could potentially go for a fake out onto the King Gambit for free and then potentially spore something else with that Amoonguss. Or, as we do see here, we do see the switch out here from the King Gambit into that Brute Bonnet, just making sure that it can take this quite easily and not even wanting to risk that King Gambit potentially being put to sleep, as we see the Flare Blitz from the Arcanine going into Iron Hands and the Iron Hands going down. A bit of the core then chipped away, making it a bit easier for Oliver to work around that the fake out support is no longer there as well.
That was quite a nice and weighted play from Oliver's side. Having to switch out a +1 King Gambit after that Defiant Fruit via the Intimidate earlier on, it just goes to show his understanding of how he needs to shape things. He's expecting the Spore to go into that slot in order to slow down the Amoonguss, or should I say, sorry, the King Gambit in this case, but he knows and is very well aware that the King Gambit can't actually pick up the direct KO onto this Amoonguss, as it doesn't have Terra Blast, even though it does have the Fire Terra type available to itself.
Exactly. Now, that is very interesting. Fire Terra is something that is used for potential, and a Willow is there, as we do see the Terra mechanic activate here on Eric's side, as we do see that Golugo going for that Terra Water, trying to make sure that this Arcanine will not hurt it as much with any sort of Flare Blitzes, for example. But then on the other hand, you still have that Brute Bonnet on the other hand that can go for a, might have gone for a Dark type move, trying to hit that Ghost typing from the Golden Go, as we do see the Flare Blitz into the Golden Go, just hitting it not very effectively because of that change of typing, as we do see the crunch. Quite a bit of damage, honestly, as the Amoonguss went for the Spore, but it doesn't affect the Brute Bonnet. Probably seeing that maybe the King Gambit is switching in back again, trying to get that Arcanine switch in as well for that Defiance. So thinking one step further in that regard, but unfortunately mispredicting that.
I think there are a couple of different layers to break down there. The Brute Bonnet does have access to the Water Terror type there. Perhaps Eric anticipating the Brute Bonnet to actually terrestrialize there as opposed to not, because you're able to resist the Make It Rain if it comes out, of course. So wanting to target down that slot with the Spore might actually make a lot of sense. However, we've got on the other hand, the Golden Go was allowed to get that Nasty Plot set up. Yes, it has lost half of its HP due to the double up there, but at least you got the redirection on the field, and the Arcanine is forced to try to target down the Amoonguss.
Exactly. And now Terra activation here from Oliver's side, going for that Terra onto that Brute Bonnet, actually trying to make sure that it goes for that Terra Water, trying to resist any sort of Make It Rains as well, trying to survive that, because then it can provide a lot more damage with any potential attacks, like for example Crunch and Sucker Punch, as we do see the Gologo go just for the Protect, while the Arcanine goes for the Extreme Speed, trying to take a bit more damage onto the Gologo instead of going for the Flare Blitz, while this Gologo can enjoy eating his leftovers a bit more, while the Crunch also going into that Protect, meaning this Amoonguss is free to do what it wants, going for a Spore yet again, but this time onto the Arcanine slot, trying to see if maybe there would be a switch out, but unfortunately that Arcanine has the safety goggles, which protects it from any sort of powder moves.
Yeah, exactly. I think Eric is just trying to make sure he can still establish a really good board state with the Golden Go available and allowed to sort of go for these very heavy sort of attacks that it can. Now that the Brute Bonnet is no longer a grass type, Rage Powder is the most optimal play for Eric to go for, as it will redirect the Brute Bonnet's attacks. Shadow Ball not enough to pick up the KO onto the Arcanine, even of course if we do see the special defensive drop, it won't matter whilst it's at 12 HP, and we're going to be seeing the Intimidate over time taking effect onto the Arcanine, not being able to dispatch as much damage as it originally would have liked, and due to the remaining 12 HP on it, it actually goes down to the recoil via the Flare Blitz. We're going to be seeing the Crunch not enough to pick up the KO on Amoonguss, and some highlights to make. I think the most important point that we need to establish here is the fact that the Amoonguss has the advantage of having Regenerator ability, whilst its past form, the Paradox Pokemon Brute Bonnet, does not. If you switch the Brute Bonnet out, it cannot have that same sort of functionality as Amoonguss does as a main redirector.
Exactly, and that Amoonguss redirecting both moves was an incredible play, just making sure that this Gologo was able to survive any sort of moves. And we have seen earlier with that earlier Intimidate, seeing that the Arcanine would do less, but putting it just in range with that recoil from that Flare Blitz, which was quite impressive to see, meaning Arcanine is now gone, no more Intimidates on that end, while as well that Gologo kind of thriving right now, even though it is a bit scared of this King Gambit that has the potential to still hit it hard with any sort of attack, because Gologo with its stabs doesn't hit this King Gambit quite hard either.
No, it doesn't. Even if it is at +2 of its nasty of its special attack via the Nasty Plot, this King Gambit is going to be a very big wall, forcing Eric to go for the second Nasty Plot. Of course, you want to try to exceed any damage resistance coming out, or should I say any damage going into the King Gambit as a direct result. We do see the Rage Powder will be redirecting both of King Gambit and Brute Bonnet's attacks into it, finally taking down the cute little shiny mushroom, allowing room now for the Arcanine to come back onto the field. And this is a scenario, Shmon, where Intimidate is going to be set off, which in turn will set off the King Gambit's Defiance, bringing it up to +1. And Golden Go is within that area where it no longer has the Ghost type, so Sucker Punch in that slot could potentially pick up the KO, and I think the Arcanine really needs to prioritize reducing or mitigating the damage output of this King Gambit as much as possible. Sucker Punch not enough to pick up the KO, as the Golden Go's just barely going to survive. Shadow Ball goes into the Brute Bonnet, does also miss the KO, will be proccing its Citrus Berry, getting a tiny bit of a recovery. So what does the Arcanine do though?
The Arcanine going for the Willows, trying to mitigate to see the amount of damage that the King Gambit can do, just trying to make sure that it's burned, making sure that it will not do as much damage. But this little Shroom, of course, still being able to spore this Arcanine, because this Arcanine does not have the safety goggles. And now look, looking like a very hard situation for Eric here. His Gologo naturally outspeeding both opposing Pokemon, but you have that priority move from that King Gambit. Even when bird, he's still at +1, and that go is terribly, terribly low.
That is the problem right now. If you are Eric, you don't have enough resource left on the Golden Goat to sort of take those hits. Whilst over on Oliver's side of the field, you do have that final third Pokemon, which we do see revealed to be the Flutter Mane. So being able to position it right now, anticipating a very passive defensive play of a Protect on this Golden Goat is quite nice. I say it's passive, it's just the fact that the King Gambit does have it relatively pinned down. So you need to burn the mandatory sleep turn on the Arcanine, and the best way that Oliver thought of handling that turn is, right, let me try to get some immediate pressure onto the field. Of course, choice specs, Flutter Mane is a very good choice for that.
Exactly. Now that Flutter Mane is on the field, Flutter Mane, of course, naturally outspeeding the Golden Goat, making sure that it can threaten it with a possible KO there, while the Arcanine still takes a turn, going for the double protect, trying to make sure that this Golden Goat will stay alive for yet another turn, while we do see the Power Gem go right into that Golden Goat, not of course affecting the Golden Goat because it is protected, while the Arcanine unfortunately still taking a turn of sleep, because that could have turned around real quick if the Arcanine woke up there. Could have done a lot of damage, for example, with a Flare Blitz into the King Gambit or even into the Flutter Mane. Now, Golden Goat did heal a bit more thanks to that leftovers, of course, but is it enough to survive any kind of move from these opposing Pokemon?
It's quite tough because I think the Arcanine definitely needed to wake up and go for the Flare Blitz. I'm not sure with that range and due to the natural physical defensive bulk of the King Gambit if it would have been enough, whilst adding on the additional residual damage of the burn at the end of the turn. But likely from me experience-wise, I think it would have just survived in that spot. It could have proved to be detrimental, but we have triple protect! Eric going for his win conditions. King Gambit, of course, will fail its Sucker Punch. Due to that triple protect, we see the focus of the Power Gem going into that slot. Of course, the choice specs locking into Power Gem makes sense in order for you to go and attack the Arcanine after. But unfortunately for Eric, even though he's getting really lucky with the double triple protect scenario, he's being quite unfortunate in the Arcanine still being asleep.
That turn could have turned around completely there. Now, there is still that 4 protect can still happen. Technically, it is small odds, but the Arcanine has taken its full 3 turns of sleep, meaning it will wake up the next turn, meaning it will be able to dish out any amount of damage. King Gambit still going for Sucker Punch, trying to see if this Golden Goat goes for any sort of attack, while this Flutter Mane still with the choice specs as well, with the Power Gem trying to KO the Golden Goat. Golden Goat not being KO'd yet, but the Power Gem going into that and managing to take out the kill, and Golden Goat finally being able to go down with that as well.
Indeed, it is finally felled out of game 1. This Arcanine will wake up. Who is it going to target? It's going for the King Gambit. Will the burn damage matter? No, at the moment it does not. It's able to survive. Flutter Mane, however, we know it is locked in Power Gem. We know the King Gambit will at least attempt to try to get one more attack. However, the Arcanine over on Eric's side does have Protect. What that means is it will want to stall out the final turn of Burn to pick up the KO onto the King Gambit and allow a 1 versus 1 scenario between the Flutter Mane and itself. Is it enough to survive the Power Gem? Is it bulky enough? Or will it be able to actually get perhaps a critical hit Flare Blitz KO into it?
Yeah, it's a very hard position. As we see the King Gambit finally going down, thanks to that burn as well, that residual damage. We might have forgotten there for a second that, of course, the Brute Bonnet is still alive. That means, and it is still that water typing, being able to threaten still quite a bit with its dark type moves, and even a potential another Spore. It is quite low HP, but this Flutter Mane is locked into Power Gem, and also locked into Power Gem, which is super effective onto the Arcanine. And on the other hand, it is also choice specs. Arcanine itself is being very bulky. The Power Gem going into it. Arcanine still surviving, slowly but surely eating its berry, its Agua berry there, healing a bit more of damage than what you're used to with Citrus, as it does go for the Flare Blitz into the Flutter Mane, and just doing a bit over half there.
Indeed, apologies, I completely forgot about the Brute Bonnet that was still available for Oliver in the back. this does naturally mean that, of course, Oliver is going to be rounding up this Game 1 win, of which was honestly such a hype match so far. I think there's a lot of things to try to process between both of these trainers with their plays, with the moments that they were choosing to either go for the setup over on Eric's side, try to maintain that board state to allow the Golden Go to deal as much damage as possible, pick up the necessary KOs it could, but over on Oliver's side, he had a really good handle on understanding that has to be Eric's strategy. How can I counteract it with my very good switch outs, the immediate pressure that the Flutter main can, of course, exude, and the King Gambit. It was burnt, but it was brought in at such really cool moments of interaction. Like that first Defiant proc, it was brought in based on the speed tiers between the Pokemon that had switched out in turn 1.
Exactly, and the Pokemon at that turn were the Arcanine and the Brute Bonnet. Of course, Arcanine being a bit faster, switching out, I mean the Arcanine switching in itself, being switched out by the Iron Hands, while the Brute Bonnet apparently moving slower there into the King Gambit, meaning that the Intimidate proccing that Defiant. King Gambit just being able to do a lot of damage with that +1, that low kick into the Iron Hands, just trying to make sure that this game of a little bit more slow play, where you try to intimidate the redirections, where your Golden can slowly but surely set up to try and avoid that, and that was immaculately played by Oliver there. Honestly, I do not know what Eric could have done differently in that situation. It was quite hard to come back from a situation like that. But we saw the triple protect is possible. It is like where there is, if you want it, if you really want it, and if your Pokemon really wants to try as well, they are willing to go that far.
If there's a will, there's a way.
Exactly.
And I think Eric did very well in recognizing his win conditions. We did, however, see, because of the burn, even if the King Gambit was at +1 of its attack stage due to the Defiant, it wasn't actually enough to pick up the KO on the Golden Go, which allowed it a bit of breathing room. But enough about Game 1, ladies, gents, and lovely peeps. We are in Game 2, where we have the lead over on Eric's side, the Amoonguss and the Iron Hands, and for Oliver, the Dragonite and the Brute Bonnet. There it is.
Exactly. We have seen this form of Dragonite already. This is the Choice Band Dragonite. Now, this one does not have inner focus, meaning that it can be faked out by, of course, the Iron Hands now, with the potential to fake out there. It can also be redirected still by the Amoonguss itself, but the Amoonguss does not want to be in the way between itself and the Terra Blast coming from this Dragonite. Then on the Brute Bonnet, of course, having Spore as well, cannot be redirected either, and maybe trying to predict here if the Arcanine is going to switch in, as actually we see the Arcanine switch in on Oliver's side, the Arcanine switching on to the Iron Hands, lowering the attack and lowering the attack from the Amoonguss as well.
Yeah, so a similar sort of fashion, at least, to what we saw in Game 1, where the Iron Hands did, of course, incur the Intimidate Spore. Now, of course, does try to direct itself into what was that Dragonite slot and is now the safety goggles Arcanine. So a relatively safe switch in there for Oliver. It seems that he did take this lead into consideration. I thought, okay, if I need to, of course, switch into any sort of spores coming this way, at least I know I can rely on my Arcanine to switch in, but also get an Intimidate drop, since there is, of course, no Defiant Pokemon that Eric does contain.
Exactly, and we do see the switch out from the Amoonguss into the Arcanine, just trying to lower the attack from both the Brute Bonnet and the Arcanine. Now, the Willows from the Arcanine going into that Iron Hands, just a little bit of residual damage, and also lowering the damage output that Iron Hands can provide as well.
Indeed, so half damage, even further mitigated damage, should I say, especially because of the Intimidate drop and the burn right now. Crunch going into the Arcanine, dealing relatively good chip damage, and we already see how impactful the Intimidate drop and the burn is, because we know Iron Hands is a very, very powerful and tanky Pokemon, and being able to get a super effective Drain Punch onto a Brute Bonnet, surely it really likes that. Of course, it was able to recover a bit of HP, but it was very minimal amount of damage that it was able to actually deal there.
Exactly, and we are being put in a situation that's interesting because, of course, the Iron Hand still has access to that Volt Switch, just being able to switch out slowly, trying to make sure that the next Pokemon that comes in will come in as well, slowly but safely. And we do see the King Gambit being switched in. Iron Hands would like to see that with a Fighting Moose, but we see the Will-O-Wisp from the opposing Arcanine from Eric, his side, into the Brute Bonnet, just burning that and just luring that attack by quite a bit, while the Spore from the Brute Bonnet into that Arcanine, because still that Arcanine does not have no safety goggles.
Exactly. The Brute Bonnet's damage output has been halved. Volt Switch from the Iron Hands will target the Kingambit, allowing Eric a bit more of that breathing room space that we're talking about due to the pivot. So Amoonguss once again being brought in. So it's quite nice to have that Volt Switch interaction and the switch out of, let's say, your second slot, and that being, let's say, Amoonguss. You could all of a sudden, within one turn, have the Amoonguss proc the Regenerator ability if it has taken any sort of damage, and just heal itself up and still find itself on the field at the end of the turn.
Yeah, exactly. And now we have to see like what is the position. Of course, the Arcanine can possibly wake up if needed. On the other hand, you still have on Oliver's side the Arcanine. You can potentially switch in, luring the attack from the Arcanine. And we have the Amoonguss being able to actually threaten the Brute Bonnet with, for example, a Pollen Puff.
Oh, exactly that. I think that's 100% a potential option that we may be seeing. However, Brute Bonnet does switch out the Dragonite, switches back in. So this is sort of a bait of a play of Oliver does not expect a Spore to be coming out here. It's quite tough for Eric to make that sort of read, but guess what? He does just that. And I guess from Eric's point of view, you could try to play into that slot. Maybe the Brute Bonnet decides to go and opt for the Water Terror. I don't think it would make a lot of sense for it to have gone for it. However, Eric just going to show that in-depth knowledge and level of understanding of, okay, cool, Oliver might try to pull a fast one on me and attempt to go for that sort of switch out to better position himself for the Dragonite to pick up a KO onto the Amoonguss the subsequent turn.
As we see the Arcanine being switched out there for the Iron Hands. Iron Hands, of course, being able to threaten with a fake out next turn. As we do see the protect from the Amoonguss, just trying to make sure that it is safe, while the Dragonite just takes a turn of sleep. Its first turn, meaning the next turn it can potentially wake up, while the Arcanine going for the Flare Blitz into that Amoonguss slot. Unfortunately, the Amoonguss itself protected, so pretty safe.
I think the thing that we have noticed, and of course has become very popular, is the fact that we have Amoonguss and Arcanine having incredible synergy, especially when paired up with either a Water-type Pokemon, but more importantly, that Iron Hands. It is so bulky. Of course, it's there to deal damage, but it's a very good role to get some pivots going, either that being Volt Switch, and if you switch it out, at least you know that you'll bring it back in with the fake out pressure. Multi-scale on Dragonite, we know that it is not in a focus. We know, of course, it has taken its first turn of mandatory sleep. It does have the option of waking up. If it does so, and the Amoonguss is still in the field, that would be quite detrimental for Eric, hence why he has opted to switch it out for the Arcanine to get an Intimidate drop as well onto the Dragonite, which is a very nice play.
Exactly. You would have liked to be now in a focus for this particular reason, but of course in other situations, multi-scale is still amazing, as we do see that Terra activation here from Oliver onto his Dragonite, going into that Terra flying, which is very scary at this move, because of course going for a potential Terra Blast, even with -1, the Choice Band makes it so strong. But unfortunately, the Dragonite, even though was able to transform, chooses to take another turn of sleep, while the Flare Blitz going into the Arcanine, doing quite a bit of damage. Must have been a critical hit there, as we see onto the sleeping Dragonite. As we do see the Volt Switch onto this Dragonite, just breaking the multi-scale, just trying to make sure that the next amount of damage will do a bit more as well.
I'm really liking Eric's play right now. I think he's definitely bringing out the heat, and he's revealed his fourth Pokemon being the Golden Go. He seems to be relying on it. He knows that once put in a very good position, it can honestly run through Oliver's team, dependent on the scenario. There is the Kingambit you need to take into consideration. So the fact that you've got Golden Go, you know that you want to try to position and force Oliver to bring that Kingambit onto the field without proccing any sort of Defiant, whilst also dispatching of it as soon as you can to allow flexibility for this Golden Go to do what a Golden Go does, pick up KOs.
Exactly, and we do see the switch out for Arcanine, just trying to keep sure that the Intimidate is kept for a bit longer, as we see the Iron Hands coming back while the Golden Go going for Protect. This is a little bit more of a slower game, but these players are positioning themselves in a way where we not seeing it right now yet, but they are positioning themselves for their eventual win con, of course, as we do see the Golgo actually protecting itself so unaffected while the Dragonite takes another turn of sleep.
This is the sort of gameplay that happens when you understand that you need to take risks to try to position yourself for the subsequent turn, or at least the next 2 subsequent turns. However, you don't want to outrightly go for any hard predicts because you know that your opponent is playing a very similar game. So the first person that will break and have to sort of forfeit a prediction that goes wrong will get punished. And that's what both of these trainers are trying to avoid. That's why we see multiple protects. That's why we see multiple switch outs as well as vault switches as the fake out goes into the King Gambit.
Exactly, and the Golgo now able to go for that nasty plot, just trying to make sure that it will be boosted. Its attack power will be raised as we see the Flare Blitz into that Golgo. Of course, that Golgo went for that Terra Water, just making sure that it was able to tank anything that the Arcanine was going to throw at it, and the leftovers just helping a bit more with that Turnly healing. And in this position, the Golgo is still looking good right now, as you can see the King Gambit might threaten it with any potential strong dark type move, but you still have the Iron Hands with a 4 times effective, the super duper effective fighting type moves onto the potential Golgo King Gambit as well.
And I think in this scenario, the King Gambit is enemy number 1 for Eric. You want to get rid of it as soon as possible. You know that it can just stay on the field and not get as threatened. You don't have any sort of, let's say, Focus Blast or something like that on a Golden Go, so there's no direct way to actually dispatch of it. It does have the Fire Terror type, if of course that is the choice maybe in another game, but in this game we know that the Dragonite has actually opted to go for the Flying Terror type. So a lot of situations that you need to take into consideration. King Gambit, though, is a very strong point that Oliver is going to have to rely on in order to get through this game 2 and propel himself forwards, as we're going to be seeing a Protect from the Golden Go.
Yeah, Golden Go protecting, just trying to make sure that it doesn't take that much damage. As we see the low kick into... Ooh! The low kick first into that Iron Hands as the Drain Punch coming out into that King Gambit, doing quite a bit of damage, even though it is burned as well. The Golden Go just enjoying that leftovers, and now you have the position where the King Gambit is quite low, and you can potentially switch in the Arcanine, just making sure that if the Dragonite wakes up, its Terra Blast will do a little bit more, a little bit less damage, so that Golgo is sure to survive as well.
I'm quite surprised that Oliver actually kept the King Gambit in there, because, you know, even though the Iron Hands is burnt, of course, due to the Will-O-Wisp that we saw earlier on in this game too, it's still a quad super effective move. It is still going to be threatening this King Gambit. Sure, maybe not with a one-hit KO from that position. However, you're able to put it within range where now the Golden Guard can actually start doing something.
Yeah, and we do see the Sucker Punch into the King Gambit, as we see a huge Make It Rain into the Dragonite, and the King Gambit barely missing out on KO onto the Dragonite, meaning that this Dragonite has to wake up right now, providing a lot of damage as it does wake up, going for the Terra Blast, that very strong Terra Blast with the Choice Band going into the Golgo and KOing the Golgo, finally being able to get rid of that Golgo itself. Now only the Iron Hands onto the field on the opposing side, meaning, but it hasn't moved yet, giving that potential of still being able to KO the Dragonite, going for the Wild Jack, and suddenly only the Iron Hands is onto the field as well.
Wow, that is a very dynamic turn of events, quite literally, in that individual turn. You got a lot of KOs with all of a sudden, we had such a build-up of a game 2. So many defensive switches, so many repositionings as well, pivot action. This is the moment that we've been talking about. It's the one moment that both trainers recognize, okay, good. I need to put on the offensive pressure right now. I can't go defensive. I need to take action. And they both have coincided at the same exact time in an eruption of KOs on both sides of the field.
Exactly, and now we have had a lot of information. We know that Golgo is now faster than Dragonite as well, which is something interesting to have maybe for potential game 3, as we see both Arcanites switched in, intimidating each other, as the Iron Hands does not quite enjoy that, because of course it is still burned and at the same time now being intimidated. But the good thing is Eric still has the Pokemon in the back, being that Amoongus with that regenerator, still having that potential of switching around with those defensive cores, as we do see the Amoongus being switched out for the Arcanine, while potentially this Iron Hands can go for a Volt Switch, just putting the Arcanine back in again.
Oh, but the Flare Blades are going into that slot, and it picks up the KO. Critical hit accompanied by it. You can see that this has been so detrimental of a turn, making the prediction and actually getting the reward of the critical hit, because we know that Amoongus is so tanky. It can survive Flare Blitzes even at neutral from the Arcanine, so quite a detrimental turn of events once again. It's so interesting that we see these two super explosive turns come one after another. Intimidate is back onto the field, as well as the Iron Hands making an entrance once again, having the fake out pressure available for Eric.
Yeah, the critical hit, of course, unfortunate, but we do still have that Arcanine being able to switch in. Now with 2 Intimidates on the field versus Oliver, and now no more Intimidates onto the Iron Hands. Iron Hands looking a bit of a better position now, still being able to Dream Punch this Brute Bonnet for super effective damage with any potential Dream Punch, and the Arcanine itself now being twice intimidated, meaning it doesn't do as much damage anymore, as we do see the Arcanine just go for the Protect, trying to see what Eric is going for, because of course the fake out into that Arcanine, meaning this Brute Bonnet can still move without being flinched as well.
Indeed. So, and just wanting to avoid any additional unnecessary damage dealt onto his Arcanine is why Oliver did attempt to go for the Protect. As we're going to be seeing, the Crunch does, of course, get a tiny bit of damage onto the Arcanine, and escorted with that a defensive drop, a secondary effect from this Crunch, which has a low chance of actually enabling. And because of that interesting interaction, we see 2 berries being procced. We see, of course, the Arcanine over on Eric's side have Agua Berry Recovery, and because of the burn, residual damage dealt over time at the end of the turn for the Brute Bonnet, it was able to get that citrus recovery.
A bit of a lunch break there, really.
A bit of a lunch break after a very exhausted, continuous amount of turns there.
Exactly, but now the defense drop onto the Arcanine, unfortunate, of course, meaning that any damage coming into it will do a bit more, as we do see the extreme speed into the Arcanine, not doing that much because that Arcanine is still intimidated twice, as the Arcanine finally wakes up, going for that Flare Blitz into the Arcanine. Not enough for a kill, but getting very close to it, at least, as the Crunch from the Brute Bonnet into the Arcanine, still hanging on, while the Iron Hands can go for the Drain Punch, making sure that this Arcanine does go down, meaning this is a 2v1 situation where we do know that the Arcanine has extreme speed onto that Brute Bonnet potentially, and the Brute Bonnet does have access to Sucker Punch. Actually, this is interesting to see, but it's very hard suddenly for Oliver to try and stall out this game a bit to see what can happen here.
I don't think Oliver will be able to have a chance to go up against both of Eric's Pokemon right now. Sure, you try to put one of the Pokemon to sleep, that being the Arcanine, only because the burn is still on the Iron Hands. No Terra type on this Brute Bonnet. It is most definitely gonna be fearing the Drain Punch, of course, that comes out from this Iron Hands. We have seen the speed interactions as well. We know that this Brute Bonnet is under pressure at the current moment. I think likely Oliver is going to have to try to think, and is likely already thinking about Game 3. There may still be somehow the way to get out, but I think this is heavily in Eric's favor here, as we will see Oliver actually locking into the Sucker Punch, hopefully trying to target down that Arcanine that goes for the double Protect.
All right, Eric has been doing pretty well with these Protects, I must say, even in multiple succession, as we do see the Sucker Punch fail, as this Iron Hands is now free to hit this Drain Punch into that Brute Bonnet, just doing a bit of damage, but healing at the same time as well, being back actually over 50%, while again this Brute Bonnet taking more damage from this burn, as is this Iron Hands. So it's a very hard situation here for Oliver, but wow, I'm just flabbergasted, like the events that were able to transpire here with even though that we actually got here to the 3-minute mark there, but seeing that these Pokemon still alive, as we do see the Sucker Punch, still not enough for the Arcanine to be taken out, as the Arcanine can go for the Flare Blitz and just make short work of this Brute Bonnet.
Indeed, of course, in that scenario, I don't think Oliver would have had enough in the gas to bring this to a Game 2 win for himself. The Brute Bonnet just was in an unfortunate position. It was burned. It didn't have a way to deal any sort of spread damage, and it was the slowest thing on the field. So a lot of things to recognize and that did
Honestly,
of course occur in that Game 2. It felt like a roller coaster of emotions there. Eric was able to navigate his way through all of the defensive build-up with the switches, the pivoting. We've got the protect plays that were quite oftenly found and most frequent, if I'm completely honest, but they all built up to this point where there was a huge eruption of 1 to 2 turns in a row. We got, I think, 4 KOs in a match that had around 67 turns, with not a lot of action.
Yeah, exactly. But let's be honest, if we're going back, because we have seen Oliver earlier on stream, and he performed a very well offensive guard, showcasing that this team also can play the long game, can play a bit slower, and where you're thinking, okay, yeah, fine, we'll take it a bit slower, but when the position is right, I will try to strike as well. But that one turn of just the Dragonite being able to wake up and the Golden Go, just going for that extremely strong make it rain, doing as much damage as it possibly can there. Just both the opponents looking at each other and just realizing this is the turn. This is the important turn that we have. This is where I make my stand.
Exactly that. So a lot of dynamics and mind games occurring, of course. So we will be going into a final deciding Game 3. Of course, as we mentioned earlier, this is sort of a callback to last year's European International Championship final, where, of course, we did see Eric come out victorious. Will we see this occur once again with the title run on the line for both of these trainers in hopes of being able to reach the finals?
Exactly, and we do see the leads again. We see Arcanine and Amoonguss come out as the Brute Bonnet and Arcanine coming across from each other, actually being opposed to each other as well, looking in sort of kind of a mirror.
A bit of a mirror, of course, where there is the difference between the Paradox Pokemon of Brute Bonnet. As of that, it's a present state counterpart of the Amoonguss, but a very similar board state indeed.
Exactly, and with both Intimidate actually managing a bit more of this effect onto the Brute Bonnet, because Brute Bonnet itself, of course, being a physical attacker, being able with Crunch and Sucker Punch, being able to not do as much damage as it would have liked to do, and both Arcanines very threatening, still having the potential of that Will-O-Wisp, which makes it even its attack stat even lower. But then we have the Amoonguss itself still kind of being afraid of this opposing Arcanine, and save the Brute Bonnet because fire beats grass.
Fire does beat grass as long as it's in a really good position and there's no Terra type involved.
Exactly.
We're going to be seeing the Arcanine switch out for the Golden Go. Flare Blitz does target down the Amoonguss over on Eric's side. Will be able to bring it down to about half of its HP, enough within the range to proc the Citrus Berry. So Amoonguss is still on the field. It may be trying to opt to go for a Pollen Puff or even a Spore in anticipation of a switch up, but no, it's the Pollen Puff because it is quad, super effective onto this grass dark type Brute Bonnet, which will get its own Citrus Berry recovery proc.
Exactly, and the switch to Golden Go, very good there. Just trying to make sure that the Spore would not be affected really onto the Arcanine. The Arcanine has slept enough for 2 games already. It is time for that Golden Go switch in onto that Spore, just putting itself in a bit of a better position. Now, of course, the Arcanine being in the back can be switched in to make this Golden Go take attacks even better thanks to that Intimidate. But then you have the next level of thinking, which can happen, which Oliver's King Gambit, which can also be switched in as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think in this scenario, we know Safety Goggles is going to be quite big on this Arcanine, especially in this certain position. But like you said, Shimon, we do actually see an introduction of the King Gambit. Is this the Arcanine right now? It is not. It is the Iron Hand wanting to actually have Fake Out available for the subsequent turn. So that sort of makes sense there. You want to get a bit of a half and half scenario if you're Eric. You're going for the water to Rastal on the Golden Go, which will allow it more breathing room in order to avoid any super effective flare blitzes going into that slot, whilst it is trying to bolster itself up. It's plotting a bit of some nasty plans going on, skyrocketing its special attack to +2 stages. Flare Blitz, not picking up any sort of burns, will target down and deal a tiny bit of chip damage on that Iron Hand.
Yeah, and now we have 4 Pokemon reveal from Eric's side, while on Oliver's side we only know 3 Pokemon still. It still has the potential of having that Dragonite with that strong choice banner Terra Blast there. Now Golago being in a position, very well positioned here, because it is +2, it is that water typing as well, so not as much threatened by that Arcanine or the King Gambit, while this Iron Hands actually on the opposing side still has the ability to fake anything out that it wants. The Golago could get a little bit more greedy, get a little bit more coins with that nasty plotting, a little even more for doing the maximum amount of damage that you want it to do. As we do see the King Gambit actually switch out here, and switching in comes in the Flutter Mane there, as we do see the fake out go into the Misdreavus of the Flutter Mane. Affected it quite a bit as we see the extreme speed into the Golago, just going for a bit of damage, but the prediction here, the Shadow Ball into the Flutter Mane, and just it going down.
Wow, that is out for the count. Ding, ding, ding. Flutter Mane is KO'd, and it is not the best switch in for that Shadow Ball, unfortunately, especially because of the +2 nasty plot boost in the previous turn. King Gambit kind of feeling bad right now. It doesn't actually have the Fallen One sort of ability where it's able to bolster its strength, utilized by its fainted out partners. Feeling a bit bad for the Flutter Mane that kind of took a hit there.
Exactly. Now this is being, of course, you lost that offensive presence of the Flutter Mane with its choice packs, just being able to chip as much damage and having a bit less of this defensive core, as we do see the Iron Hands switch out here for the Amoonguss, just trying to make sure that potentially could go for a redirection the next turn, or possibly a Spore as well, because now Flutter Mane being done and out. You do have that Terra actually onto the King Gambit, seeing that Fire Terra this time around, trying to make sure that it can't do no wrong by getting Dream Punched by the Iron Hands that was in the previous turn.
As the Golden Go goes for the Protect, feeling like it needs a bit of a well-deserved rest there after that huge KO it was able to pick up, wants to avoid any extreme speed or any sort of damage, double up from both the Arcanine and this King Gambit's Assurance. However, we've got the Amoonguss, which is now a really good support Pokemon partner for this Golden Go going into the next turn, as Leftovers allows the Golden Go to sort of re-bolster its remaining HP, and now it's all about, I guess, the mind games. What do you do with the King Gambit if you are Oliver? Are you scared of this Spore coming out from the Amoonguss?
We do see the extreme speed from the Arcanine going into that Golden Go, as we see the Shadow Ball going into the Arcanine, a huge critical hit. This Arcanine previously had 2 critical hits and now finally got critical hit back, as we do see the Assurance doing quite a bit of damage onto the Golden Go, as the Spore does come out from the Amoonguss, putting the King Gambit in a bit of a dire situation, of course, and only one Pokemon being in the back, being that Brute Bonnet.
There is a thought that I'm having at the back of my mind is, does the critical hit really matter? But I think it's within that gray line of Pokemath coming in right now, of the damage rolls at that point. It might have just been outside of reach of any sort of maximum damage roll. So the critical hit likely would have mattered, and it was very crucial. Eric was able to capitalize off of the advantage there, just pick up the KOs. It's what we discussed. The Golden Go wants to sweep. Please put it in a position to sweep, and that is what it is doing right now.
Exactly, and now with the King Gambit asleep, the Brute Bonnet is not really in a happy position, as we see the switch out actually from the Golden Go into the Iron Hands here, just trying to make sure that the potential fake out here, as we do see the Protect actually from the Brute Bonnet, meaning the next turn another Protect would be half by chance, meaning a Pollen Puff in and fake out could definitely go into that slot as well.
Indeed, Pollen Puff tries to target down and pick up any sort of KO, or at least some really good damage. We saw it dealt about half of the Brute Bonnet's HP's worth in the first couple of turns. However, might have been a double protect there, actually, from the Brute Bonnet. It does not want to go down to any sort of pressure here. Fake Out trying to target it down. You see that Eric maybe wanting to get rid of it to open up the King Gambit following turn, but the King Gambit, unfortunately, is still asleep. And the double protect actually being a bit of a lifeline in conjunction with the additional sleep turn.
Exactly. Now the King Gambit has a little bit more chance of waking up, and King Gambit does have a move that might help here a bit versus that Among Us. For example, the Iron Hat, you have always that chance to flinch as well, because you do not want to get hit by a Drain Punch nor a Pollen Buff, as we do see the switch from the Iron Hats into that Golden Goal. Back at it again with that water typing, as we do see the King Gambit still asleep, still taking a royal sleep there, while this... Oh, the Brute Bonnet went for the Spore there, going into the Goodness Goal. A well-predicted play there, as the Pollen Puff coming out into the Among Us, doing quite a bit of damage, but barely missing out on the KO there.
Barely missing out indeed. I think we had seen it's roughly going to survive based on the damage earlier on. However, Golden Go just showing off its really cool ability of Good as Gold. It's able to completely ignore all status type moves onto itself. Sucker Punch, however, is something it cannot dodge, and it does get KO'd.
Exactly. Now this Golden Goal finally going down after being so bulky and healing so much damage thanks to this Arcanine and this Among Us and even the Iron Hands, as the King Gambit finally wakes up, going for the Iron Hand, hoping for that potential flinch as well.
Indeed, Spore, though, is allowed to get dispatched back into this King Gambit, putting it back to sleep, unfortunately. No flinches for Oliver, and we're in a scenario where Eric is free to bring in the Iron Hands. Fake Out pressure, it's obvious, it can go into the Brute Bonnet. However, there's a couple of different layers of mind games. Do you expect Oliver to go for the very safe protect, or do you want to make sure you are still targeting that slot in case Oliver tries to go for a read?
Exactly, going for the protect, just making a safe play, trying to make sure that Fake Out does not kill this potential Brute Bonnet, as we do see the sleep activate of King Gambit, meaning this Iron Hands went for a Drain Punch, doing a little bit of damage, but thanks to that fire typing, not doing as much damage either.
Indeed, it's now going to fire Terra type. It is no longer quad weak to the fighting type. Pollen Puff once again trying to get rid of this Brute Bonnet. Now, Oliver is going to have to really rely on a couple of multiple protects in conjunction with any wake up, which we do see come out from the King Gambit. It does move first. It does go into the Amundi slot. Does it pick up a flinch is the real question. Brute Bonnet does actually go ahead and get the Spore. It outspeeds the Iron Hands over on Eric's side. Of course, taking the mandatory turn of sleep. Do we see a flinch again? No! No flinch! Pollen Puff is able to finally pick up the KO onto the Brute Bonnet, leaving this affair in a 3 versus 1 advantage for Eric.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to go for Iron Hat as much as possible, just trying to get that flinch, making sure that Among Us couldn't go for any sort of attack into that Brute Bonnet, trying to keep your 2 Pokemon alive, just making sure that you can be put in a position where both Pokemon are still able to put that offensive pressure, because Iron Hands is asleep. Now Low Kick doing quite a bit of damage, well predicted that foreseeing. Okay, it's fine. The Among Us has put the Brute Bonnet has KO'd that, but doing a bit of damage to this Iron Hands, while the Iron Hands, of course, as well, took 1 turn of sleep, meaning the next turn it can't wake up, but the King Gambit has to choose if it goes for an attack into the Among Us slot, because the Among Us has that possibility of always being able to Spore, while this Iron Hands can possibly wake up and do a lot of damage as well.
Very nice calculated decision here to switch the Amoongus out. You want to be able to reactivate the Regenerator ability. However, we do have the adverse effect of the Defiant boost now, allowing this King Gambit to dish out a tiny bit more damage now that it is, of course, at +1 of its attack.
Exactly, and now we actually, pretty interesting to see the Iron Hand still asleep, meaning the next turn it can possibly wake up, if I recall correctly, and Low Kick now doing a bit more damage thanks to that Defiant boost. Arcanine not really being able to hit this King Gambit for really hard damage. as we do see the switch out here from the Iron Hands into the Amoonguss, predicting a possible low kick being not very effective onto its poison typing from the Amoonguss itself. As we see the Flare Blitz from the Arcanine into the King Gambit, not doing that much damage because, of course, it is a fire type now.
There's no real good way for this Arcanine to actually deal damage onto the King Gambit, which of course does share the same type right now, that being the Terra Fire. You want, if you're Eric, to reposition yourself to the point where you can put this King Gambit to sleep, you can actually go ahead and get some really good damage, or should I say consistent damage from the Iron Hands, but you've got to really avoid tripping up. If you allow this King Gambit any sort of window, it will come back and it will steal the game from you.
Exactly. Now you have to be careful because low kicking into that Amoonguss slot is might be dangerous because of course it can protect. The Arcanine can just go for that little bit of chip more because you really want to get rid of this Amoonguss because the Amoonguss can win the game for definitely for Eric. You still have the amount of damage that the Arcanine can put out, and as well you have the fake out pressure still from that Iron Hands as well, which can guarantee you Eternal Sleep. But having both of them onto the field is quite hard when this King Gambit keeps dishing out these hard-hitting moves as well.
It is indeed, and something that we do need to take into consideration is Eric may actually be playing to timer concurrently as to trying to whittle down this King Gambit HP or remaining HP. I believe I had just caught a glimpse of Oliver's your time remaining at around 1 minute 45, but that may not actually be enough time to allow Oliver to try to make the comeback. Low kick, oh, goes into the Amoonguss slot, perhaps anticipating an Iron Hand switch in there, but it is unfortunately, as a direct result, going to be put to sleep for perhaps the third or fourth time during this individual game, and we see Oliver finally going ahead and conceding the match in what was honestly an absolute treat for everyone, including ourselves, to view between these top world-class players.
Exactly. We have seen so many different layers of play and understanding of each other's team and what is the win condition, what is the play to make here, what is the time that I have to click my offensive move to really try turn this game around, because you want to try, it is the positioning once and forth again between the trainers.
Indeed, as of course, we know that Eric is going to be progressing into the top 4 right now. He's very happy. We can, of course, see his smile there in the stream. Quite unfortunate for Oliver, of course, commiserations, but such an incredible feat to be able to reach this stage. We know Oliver, we know how consistent he has been throughout multiple years. Absolutely. And multiple formats. Of course, we were just talking about that. He was the finalist that went up against Eric in last season's European International Championship. So seems like at the current moment, history is trying to repeat itself.
Exactly, and now going into top 4 then, that means that is, of course, one more hurdle passed after first your day 1, then the day 1 Swiss, then the day 2 Swiss, and now top 8 first round, and now we are in top 4, and now maybe seeing him back later again, but of course, both players played that immaculately. Like, it was a different level of understanding. It is amazing to see what the potential plays were. Just seeing how well positioning the potential fake out, the Amoonguss with its spores, of course, as well, and the intimidates from the Arcanine. Just trying to make the clock tick, really.
No, yeah, because there's a lot of different cycles that kept on repeating over and over and over again. Like you mentioned, you got the fake out, you got the Volt Switch pivot, interaction with the regenerator of the Amoonguss, where it could try to switch out. You have the Iron Hands on the field, Volt Switch, bring it back in, and you've got an Arcanine on the other side there, threatening with either Will-O-Wisp burns or Flare Blitz raw fire type damage. And once again, switch that back out so you can preserve Intimidate for a later stage, of course. So seeing both of these trainers consistently get those various cycles going on and on and on, and somehow still stand and sit and breathe like us. It is an incredible feat, no doubt.
And honestly, you have to imagine as well, these players have been doing this for over 2 days in different rounds, where they had to adapt their plan again and again and see what is happening. Like, this is intense level of thinking, because as we have seen, especially in that end game, where the King Gambit had to choose, like, is he going to switch into the Iron Hands? Am I just going for the Iron Head into that Among Us? It is something hard to predict, but like, those are the so many possibilities that these players are trying to give themselves to just make it harder for your opponent to know what you are actually thinking of doing.
Well, exactly, because even though you've got your game plan, your opponent has their game plan. Your plan, obviously, is if you have a certain type of strategy based on the particular team that you've decided to bring to the tournament, you may go about it in a couple of ways. We've seen various teams actually have more of a reactive stance as opposed to what the current meta is, whilst on the other hand, you've got some other bespoke strategies with a certain particular cause of Pokemon that work quite well. You have your own setup, for example. You've got redirection, you've got Dondozo Tatsugiri, you've got various sort of strategies that you can implement, but the battle between those two trainers, you had a couple of calls within your overall team where they acted as a sponge against your opponent's team. The Fire, Water, Grass Claw, you've got the Iron Hands having that fake out pressure, having its ridiculous tankiness as well as offensive physical damage output, which just works and synergizes in such a beautiful way, which is why it's honestly such a strong call.
It is so strong, and it's hard to break through. Of course, you have those limited amount of Pokemon that can try and do as much as damage. You have that Fluttermane with that Choice Spec, which can deal a lot of damage. But yeah, if your opponent suddenly catches on what you are trying to do, trying to make that safe switch towards it, and just being able to KO that is very detrimental. And the same thing for, like, for example, the Dragonite. And it is that Golago that was able to slowly try to make sure, like, I am gonna try and set up. I have these 3 Pokemon next to me doing their best of giving the best position for me to set up and just make it rain.
Well, make it rain, and make it rain it did. Of course, that was Eric Rios, which has been able to clinch his spot into the top 4 of our Utrecht special event. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cut straight to the couch interview area. We'll be able to hear more from him shortly, so we'll pass it straight over to you.
Hello, Pokemon trainers. What a spectacle we were able to behold there. An absolutely fantastic top 8. And I am joined by the winner of that match, Eric Rios. Eric, how are you feeling after such an intense match?
Hello, James. Jamie, sorry. The match was so difficult for me. I played the same team in Swiss rounds against Leonardo Bonanomi, and I had to read everything like I did in the game 3, the Shadow Ball and Fake Out to prevent the Fluttermane switching, but the reason of the Shadow Ball and Fake Out was predicting the King Gambit Terrafy to do some damage and avoid to do the Assurance and Extreme Speed into my Goldengo. But it's a super difficult matchup for me.
Yeah, it did seem like it. It seemed like Oliver was really playing well in that first game. Very, very tricky indeed. But you did manage to adapt. You did end up going with the same strategy as you did in that game 1. Why did you decide that the 4 Pokemon you brought to the game 1, even though it was a loss, was the strategy for the game 2 and the game 3?
I did the same for the 3 games, and I repeat the lead in game 2 because I am afraid of King Gambit lead if I intimidating. So that's why I lead with Iron Hands and Among Us, because I don't want to give King Gambit a free boost in the beginning of the match. And seeing the Oliver's leads and the Oliver's pressure in game 1 and game 2, you try to lead with Arcanine this time, trying to avoid King Gambit, and it works.
Yeah, it did seem to work, and so Oliver switched it up a little bit in that game 2, bringing the Dragonite instead. Do you think the Dragonite was something you found a bit easier than the Fluttermane?
Dragonite is quite good with the Choice Band, can do a lot of damage. Sometimes when I face Choice Band Dragonite with King Gambit, I need always to protect and play some defensive or some aggressive plays, depends on the situation. But it's true that if I face that, maybe I need to change my typing with my Among Us and maybe try to spore Dragonite. So I think Oliver did good doing that, because I think Dragonite is quite good against me. I'm not sure about Fruitermane. I think Fruitermane always can keep the pressure, but I think Dragonite it's quite good against me, better than Fruitermane.
Yeah, well, you were able to win the game that the Dragonite came to, and then catching the Fluttermane very nicely in that game 3. Really, really nice play indeed. Of course, this was a repeat of the finals of the International Championship that you did end up winning. So how are you feeling going up against the person you were against in the finals of that International?
When I saw my top 8 match, and I saw that it was Oliver, I thought, okay, we will have a rematch from the Europe Internationals, and when I face Oliver, is always a great battles, because he's so good and he makes always good calls. He knows to predict. Sometimes do good turns, so it's always difficult to play him. And yeah, finally I won that top 8 match, sorry, and yeah, I am in top 4 and happy to win that match, and that hard match for me. And let's see how it goes today. Yeah,
absolutely. One step closer to yet another championship, so you're into the top 4. How are you feeling about your chances of winning the whole thing?
I'm feeling super good. Playing these days, I did like 12-2 in total, 9-0 yesterday, and I'm feeling good playing. Well, I lost to Juanma. I don't know if he's top 4 now, but he did 5-0 today and 8-1 yesterday, and he lost against me, and he won against me today. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good playing today. Yeah, I think I have chances to win.
Yeah, well, you put on a fantastic show so far. Yeah. Absolutely fantastic match in
Thank
that
you so
top
much.
8. We are looking forward in your top 4 as well, where I'm sure it will be another great game. So make sure you are not going anywhere. We will be right back very shortly after we cut to a short break for the top 4 of the Pokemon Utrecht special events. Stay tuned.